The first year of operations, we made $29,000. The second year, we made over $700,000. By the time I left the company, it was over $20 million. $2 million was a significant threshold because at that point, up to that point, it was founder-led sales. So I was the one doing the selling, right? I didn't need a sales team.
Welcome to today's episode of Sask Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today we have a very exciting guest, Chris Izquierdo, who is the current CEO of Sparrow Connected and the former CEO of Defacto. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it, Manib.
So Chris, I'm actually really inspired by your journey because you've actually built a company, Defacto, by coming to Canada as an immigrant, and then ultimately being the CEO of Defacto for 13 or so years, and then incubated an idea in Defacto that became Sparrow Connected. So tell us a little bit about what your background is and how you actually evolved in your journey.
Yeah, great question. So I was born and raised in Cuba, went to the University of Havana. My background is computer science. So I took computer science, graduated with honors out of the University of Havana, and then a Canadian company out of Edmonton offered me an opportunity to come and work in Edmonton for about 6 months, ended up being 8 months, and eventually I returned back to Cuba and came back for good as an immigrant to Edmonton. For my first few years, it's such a different culture, such a different way of living, right? Like, for example, in Cuba, I didn't know the difference between credit and debit. It doesn't exist. It's a cash-based society. So I'm coming to a brand new country. I'm learning the culture. I'm learning the language. And about 10 years into my arrival in Canada, I decided to start my own company. And, it was always something that I wanted to try. And I didn't know if I was going to be successful. I didn't know anything about business, really. And decided to start Defacto with a couple of other friends. I still remember we were sitting in my townhouse in Edmonton. We ordered pizza. I burned I burned the table where I put the pizza right on the table. My wife still reminds me to this day, to which I say it's like, that's probably the best burnt table that we ever had, right? And that's in that meeting, we decided to start Defacto Technologies. And, it was an interesting journey. At the beginning, the first year of operations, we made $29,000. That's revenue. There's 3 of us. So that's not paying the bills, right? So
wow.
After that, we all 3 of us were good technically. And we had lots of clients that we have delivered successful projects for, and they really like working with us. But none of us had an experience in sales. So I talked to my 2 other business partners, and said, listen, somebody has to specialize in sales. I'll do it. And let's see where this goes. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful. So, the second year we made over $700,000 in revenue. And, by the time I left the company, it was over $20 million.
Wow.
In revenue. And, we expanded beyond Edmonton, of course, to Regina, Calgary, and Toronto as well.
That's great. Yeah.
That was that was part of the journey. As part of that, back in 2017, we identified a need in the workplace, and that need is to better communicate with your employees. We have been winning all these awards for engagement as well as for growth, and I truly believe that they're related. If you have an engaged workforce, your company growth and outpace your competitors, and we were able to do that. For the first 13 years that I was at Defacto, and we were the fastest growing company in Alberta in 2010. We were in the top 10, 7 years in a row, to the point that they said, okay, don't apply anymore. We need other companies to enter the top 10 here. But for me, it was all because of employee engagement. We care about our employees, and in turn, our employees will care about our clients. It was a simple equation. Happy employees equal satisfied customers, right? And this is back in 2010, which this was still, it wasn't common knowledge. At the time, a lot of organizations were trying to figure out how to optimize their workforce to generate more profit. And for us, it was the opposite. I want to optimize their well-being, and that will take care of itself for the profits, right? If you wanted 2 monitors, you got 2 monitors. If you wanted a faster laptop, you got a faster laptop. You had to have the proper tools. You have to have the proper environment. I wanted the office to be better than what you could have at home. I wanted you to, Monday came and you wanted to come to the office. You're going to work with our friends. You're going to, do meaningful work. You were going to advance your career, and you were going to do it in an environment that supported you and that it was enjoyable, a great experience, right? But there was one thing that was missing, and that was communication. We were terrible at it. We still probably are, right? And we didn't have a proper platform to communicate with our employees. And we were building communication platforms for our clients, but inevitably, two things happen. One, they either ran out of money or they run out of interest because it was taking too long to produce, right? The really meaningful change that they were looking for could not be done within the context of a consulting engagement. And that's why we decided to build Sparrow. I wanted to have a SaaS platform that I could quickly and easily roll out to them that would actually produce that meaningful change that they're looking for.
Wow. So it seems to me that, one of the recipes of success, and this has been, demonstrated in your earlier venture, was employee engagement and really taking care of the employees. And you kind of modeled that into this platform, Sparrow Connected, so that other companies can make use of the same model and help them grow and help them achieve better engagement, better communication, and ultimately better employee satisfaction.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And if you go back 15 years, the notion at the time in business was, what are you doing for your customers, right? Like how you're treating your customers and so on. And nobody was paying attention to the employee. And of course, you owe it to your customers to treat them right, but those are table stakes, right? You owe to have a good product at a proper price and so on, but those are table stakes. We said, let's focus on the employee experience. And the world has evolved since, right? So now there's more companies and products tackling the employee experience because finally we realize that's what drives the success with your customers. At the end of the day, I'm not the one talking to my customers on a regular basis. My team is. My team has to be empowered, has to be engaged in order to provide that beneficial or that great experience for our customers. So that's what we try to encapsulate with Sparrow Connected. And that's what we are selling to the world as a product, as a SaaS company.
Wow. So with regards to the kinds of companies that you work with and that can make use of this platform, who would be the ideal target audience?
Yeah, our ideal customer profile is any company that has at least 300 employees, because below 300 employees, your communication happens a little bit more on the fly. You know what I mean? Like it's more endemic to the organization. You can have an all staff meeting, you can communicate. I can see you in the hallway, we can go for lunch and so on. But as soon as you start exceeding that threshold of 300 employees, those patterns of communication break down. And communication starts to break down. So you communicate with managers communicate with employees. And now you're playing this telephone game that we used to play at parties growing up in Cuba anyway, where I would tell you a secret and that secret would go around the room. And by the time it got back to me, it had very little resemblance to what was communicated initially, right? And that's what happens in organizations.
So true.
So if you have more than 300 employees and to unlimited number, right? Like we have clients that have 25,000, 30,000 employees and more, you have this problem. And now I would argue with the pandemic and the move to hybrid workplaces or remote only workplaces, the problem is we're starting to see that problem even in smaller companies. Because what used to be everybody was co-located, right? In one office. That's no longer the case. Now, maybe you go to the office 1 or twice a week. The rest of the time you're working from home. So how do you have that communication on an ongoing basis of what's important, that transparency that you require, right? So we're starting to see it in some of our clients are actually smaller organizations now. And 2 years ago, we didn't see that. 2 years ago, it was all 300 plus.
I've been having some great conversations with a variety of businesses. And one of the challenges that the COVID pandemic has posed is to really foster a good and healthy company culture, which has been challenging because of remote work. So have you, obviously you're trying to bridge that gap and help companies achieve a healthier culture. How does Sparrow Connected help companies with that in terms of communication and engagement? What are some of the aspects of the platform that can actually help them achieve those goals?
Yeah, in terms of how we do it, there's 3 high-level principles that we abide by. And they're gonna seem simple when I tell them to you, but they're really difficult to implement unless you have a platform like Sparrow. One is segmentation, the ability to send different messages to different people in your organization based on location, role, interest, tenure, right? Like, are they new employees or old employees? Because they have different communication needs. Are you in the field or are you sitting at an office? Different communication needs again, right? Are you a manager or not? Again, different communication needs. So how do we do that targeting, and how do we do it at scale, right? You have 2,000 employees. How do we manage to segment your organization to different cohorts, and how do we send different messages to those different cohorts, right? So that's one. The other one is an omnichannel platform. Because here's what we realized, and we realized this a long time ago. Intranets alone don't work. So an intranet, even the best ones in the world, and there's tons of study on the subject, you can find them on the internet, will allow you to communicate effectively with about 19% of your population. That means that 4 out of 5 employees are not receiving content that they are supposed to do their job, to generate the company alignment that you want, alignment around your vision, your mission, your values, your strategy, and so on, right? So why is that? Well, it's not the platform. It's just that that's the channel, and that channel only resonates with 19% of your population. The other 80% is looking for maybe a combination of email, mobile apps, text messages, Microsoft Teams, Slack integration, and so on. Just like your parents or my parents always subscribed to a newspaper, and the newspaper was delivered to my house, I've never done that. That doesn't mean that I don't read news. I do. I just get them online, right? So that's what we try to bridge. It's like those different generations in the workplace through multiple channels where we keep all those channels in sync. So that if I comment in one, that comment is automatically propagated to all the other channels. So there's one conversation around a topic in the organization, regardless of where people are engaging with or from, but we're giving them options. And that preference generates the engagement that you're looking for. And then the last one is analytics. That's the last principle. We need to measure everything that is happening so that you know how to improve. Because quite frankly, some companies, the content that they're producing is maybe too long, is maybe written at a too high level. Like if you have a company with many immigrants and you're writing at a university level, they're not going to understand or care about what you're saying, unfortunately, right? So how do we do that? How do we give you the metrics that we tell you, here's the ideal tone, here's the ideal size, here's the ideal readership level for your organization? And you'll be surprised how different it is from organization to organization, even in the same vertical. That you can have 2 law firms that have different engagement patterns with content. And we have that in our portfolio, right? So those are the 3 main reasons. Those are the 3 main principles that we align with when we're creating any features on our platform to try to make sure that you get the right content to the right people and that they actually read it.
So this seems to solve probably one of the biggest challenges, which is to foster that company culture and to have that communication leverage between your employees. How do you communicate this value proposition to your target audience? Because yes, it seems simple, but when applied, it could be quite complex depending on how the company is structured. So what are maybe some of the ways that you're actually using your messaging to grow your market base, and how are you creating awareness right now?
Yeah, I mean, we produce content around the topic on a regular basis, right? And we're garnering quite a following in LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, right? Some of our social media properties. We also have webinars with existing customers that can talk about how is it different this time. Because one of the challenges with communication platforms is that most organizations have tried to solve this problem before. And you try it 2-3 times and you become cynical about it. It's like, it doesn't matter what we do. We blame the previous vendor, right? And brought a new vendor in, and now we're blaming this vendor, and we're going to bring another one, and so on. So how is it going to be different this time, right? And they talk about how is it different, how is it actually making a significant impact in their operations. And, we want to move away from measuring outputs. And I'll explain outputs. Outputs is I created 10 pieces of content, right? And each of them received 20 comments, 30 people engaged, and so on. That's just what's happening. We want to get to the point where we're measuring business outcomes, right? Like how, do increase the happiness of your employees, the engagement with the organization, you reduce attrition, you increase productivity, and so on. And that's truly the holy grail for what we're trying to do here. Because if I can prove those things, then the conversation that I'm having with you for your organization is very simple. It works like this. I tell you, what's your attrition today? You're going to tell me 10%. And I go, okay, how much does it cost you to train each new employee? Well, it's about, 3 months wasted of their wage. The average wage is $80,000. You have $240,000 for 3 employees alone, right? So if I solve that and I reduce that by 1, 2, 3 employees, that attrition, and I also increase the productivity of the employees that are still with you in the organization, then this platform pays for itself, right? We're solving a true business problem. It's really easy to explain to the C-suite, and it's something that they want to address.
Makes sense. So I want to go back a little bit in your journey there and talk about how you've grown Defacto from 29,000 to 20 million plus. Because again, I find that journey very inspiring, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, it's quite challenging to reach that level, and it requires a completely different mindset to run $1 million business versus a $20 million business. So can you maybe highlight a couple of major challenges that you faced when growing the company to that level, and what was your vision?
Oh, we had so many challenges. I mean, here's what I realized. What I realized is that companies go through stages. And, there's thresholds at which you have to change the way you're doing things or you're not going to grow further. And one of those, we saw it was around $2 million. So for a consulting company on the type of projects that we were doing, $2 million was a significant threshold because at that point, up to that point, it was founder-led sales. So I was the one doing the selling, right? I didn't need a sales team. But that's the first time in our history that I had to build a sales team. So now I have to step away, and that's difficult to do, right? I'm putting food on the table. I'm the one signing the deals. And all of a sudden, I'm going to bring somebody else that I'm going to have to train. I slow down sales while that person comes up to speed, right? And then I'm going to hire a second one and a third one and a fourth one and so on and start building this team. So that was one of the lessons that we learned is like there's these thresholds and your processes, your tooling as well. Like when we got to $20 million, the time tracking system that we were using was no longer acceptable, right? We were spending more time managing the reports that came out of that system than actually delivering projects. So all of a sudden now we have to implement an ERP system. Right? And in between those lessons, there's a ton. At the end of the day, for me, has always been, we set up in November and December, we would plan our year. And by the end of that planning session, we had an objective for the year. We had an idea on how we were going to grow and, challenge ourselves, as well as we're going to maintain this level of service or improve the level of service that we have with our customers. That was communicated to the entire team. There goes communication again, right? And multiple times so that they started buying into it, right? And, we always look for what else can we do? Where are competitors what are they not seeing that we can see? And, that's how we expanded to Saskatchewan, to be honest, right? We would look at our competitors in Edmonton, and they were all going to Calgary. And I'm like, why go to Calgary and compete with everybody else when there's a market in the province next door in Saskatchewan that doesn't seem to have as much competition at the moment, right? And there's a need. While we're selling, they're buying. So I remember our first client in Saskatchewan was FCC, Farm Credit Canada.
Yes.
And I went and met with them. At the time, they were building their initial SharePoint implementation. I flew to Regina, had a good conversation with them, and they signed off with us for this project that turned into a multi-year relationship and grew and so on. Then we signed Sask Power, Sask Energy, SaskTel, right? We established a presence in the city. We hired local talent, trained local talent, and grew the local economy and so on. But it would have been easier for us to go to Calgary. That's what everybody else was doing. But I always thought there's a huge opportunity here that people are not looking at, right? And there's a great, a place that is friendly to do business in. that has a need. And those are the type of things that we did on a regular basis in order to continue to grow as an organization.
That's interesting. And, I was going to ask you, what do you love about doing business in Saskatchewan? Because you have a different perspective. You have done business elsewhere as well, and you've had the opportunity to grow your market in Saskatchewan. So how has it been different from that perspective?
Yeah, I'll tell you two things, and they might be surprising or maybe not. One is how approachable companies in Saskatchewan are. I was very easily able to get meetings with decision makers in Saskatchewan. Doing the same thing in Calgary would have been very, very difficult, right? Because they don't know you. They don't want to meet with you. They're getting, bombarded with requests from vendors on trying to meet with them. In Saskatchewan, that wasn't the case. In Saskatchewan, I could pick up the phone, talk to the secretary or the personal assistant of the CIO of one of the organizations and have a meeting booked for later that week or next week. That approachability makes doing business so much easier, right? Because I'm able to understand what your needs are, and I can tell you whether we can solve them or not. And often we're able to solve them. Other times we were not, and I would just recommend something else, right, or someone else. That was quite significant. That was number one for me, and number two is a desire to improve. And you don't get that everywhere.
Yes,
right. Like, when people look at Saskatchewan, they think, well, let's talk about Saskatoon and Regina without, upsetting any of your listeners. But, Saskatoon is more private enterprise, right? Regina is more government center, right? Like the crown corporations are there, the municipality, the ministries, and so on. But even in Regina, the level of innovation of those crown corporations and that government, that provincial government, is quite significant compared with anywhere else in Canada. They're always looking for what's next, what's new. They're adopting new technology, and they want to move that needle. And that's not, like, that combination of access and the desire for innovation bode really well with what we're doing at Defacto, right? Because those were two of our main principles that we operate. Is that innovation was key to us. So we even have an innovation practice that's all they focus on, right? So we were able to have those meaningful conversations really early on. But yeah, I love doing business in Saskatchewan. I think it's one of those hidden gems, and it's not as hidden anymore. I think in the last 10 years, we've seen competition increase quite significantly. New companies come into the market that have grown even from within or come up from somewhere else, right? But yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic place to do business in.
That's great. So the idea of Sparrow Connected, I mean, obviously you mentioned that you started working on the idea in 2017, and this started out as kind of like an idea that incubated in your previous company, which is Defacto. So you worked on it for 2 or 3 years and then decided to exit from Defacto and ultimately move on to Sparrow Connected. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the mindset of exiting from a company, because when you are working and you've built your company, again, from 29,000 to 20 million over the course of 15, 16 years, it's almost like a baby, right? I mean, you are connected, even though you don't want to be emotionally connected, but you are somewhat emotionally connected, but you're working on potentially a bigger project as a result of that exit. So describe to me that mindset as far as what did it take for you to exit that company and then start a Sparrow Connected?
Well, I joke and tell people that it took a global pandemic, but that's not entirely true. It's really difficult. It was a very difficult decision, and I made it for a number of reasons. One, I felt the company was in a good place, and my business partner could take over and continue the journey that we were on and continue to grow the company, and so on. Right? That was, I think, that was probably the best. The main criteria for me was that fact, but also because we have this huge opportunity with Sparrow. The future of work was shifting, was changing. It was pretty obvious that coming out of the pandemic, we were not going to be in the same place that we were when we went in, right? And the true and tried options of pre-pandemic times were not going to work after the pandemic was over. Now, I was hoping that the pandemic would be a little bit faster and end up sooner. But anyway, we're here now in March of 2022, right? Coming to the end of the pandemic. And I think those principles that vision has turned true. Companies are now talking about remote only, hybrid workplaces, and a little bit of a change. But it was a really, really tough decision to make. You're right. Like, as an entrepreneur, that was my baby. That's still my baby, right? And just like babies sometimes have to go to university and leave the house, I felt that was what we had to do here. And there was a unique opportunity to change the world. And change the world at a scale that it was not accessible with Defacto. Like it truly wasn't, right? Like you look at where we are now, we have clients in Canada, the US, Mexico, Portugal, Israel, Brazil, like all over the world, right? That we're making a meaningful change in this. And there's a whole industry that we can revolutionize if we do things right. And there's a lot of work to be done, right? Like we're nowhere near where we need to be in order to accomplish that, but the chance is there, the opportunity is there. And that combined with, I'm going to learn so much new things, because sales and marketing in a consulting company is very different than in a product company, right? And there's a huge challenge ahead. I've always been one to love new challenges, and that was, the company's taken care of, and there's a new challenge too, so why not? Let's try it. And here we are, a year and a half later.
Right. So where do you see Sparrow Connected going in the next decade?
Well, we want to become a household name, right? So we want to become the operating system of corporate communications. So if we do everything right, companies around the world will be communicating using our platform with their employees, measuring the effectiveness of that communication, and improving on a continuous basis to generate the engagement, the adoption, the readership that they're looking for. That's where we ultimately want to be. I don't care about the size, and I never care about revenue or profits. And my investors probably don't want to hear this part. They want to, but truly that takes care of itself. If you do the right thing for your customers and your employees, everything else will work out. I truly believe that, and I've proven that in any company that I've led in the past. And I think the same thing will be true here. We'll build the right platform, we'll build the right processes in order to become that operating system of corporate communications. And if we do that effectively, we're going to have the revenue, we're going to have the profits that everybody's looking for.
So Chris, on more of a personal note, if you were to go back in your earlier years of the business, let's say 10 years back, what advice would you give to your younger self?
So all my life, I suffer from imposter syndrome. And if you're familiar with imposter syndrome, is, it's common in a lot of entrepreneurs, right? We're doing something that we don't really know, that we don't really understand, and we start to second guess ourselves, right? And that's where I think entrepreneurs run into trouble, right? When they start second guessing themselves because of that. So I've learned over the last 15 years to drown out those voices that says, well, you're maybe getting into something that you don't really know. And the reason for that is because I've always tried to prepare myself, learn as much as I can on a subject, trust the team that I have, right, to make the right decisions. So the advice that I would give myself is that, like, don't let imposter syndrome get in the way of what you want to accomplish from a business perspective in any of your organizations.
Well, studies have shown that high achievers actually suffer more from imposter syndrome. It's just the nature of the world that we live in. And I think it is true. I mean, self-doubt can sometimes destroy us if we don't believe in ourselves. And we have to believe in ourselves if we want others to believe in what we're doing.
Right.
So it's really important to fight that negativity, that noise in your head. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one.
And it seeps in,
It
right?
It does.
And it seeps in. Yeah. And sometimes, you lose a big client and you're like, oh, what? And it's always good to evaluate what you did wrong and how you could do it better. But that can undermine your confidence at a time where maybe it doesn't need to be, right? Like, it's normal part of doing business sometimes. And, like that's one of the advices. The other one, in my opinion, is we have a lot of resources at our disposal by the federal, the provincial governments, the banks, and so on. Utilize them. Like, I always try to, early on, we grew the company without any external investment. Like, we each of the three founders put $500 down. That's how we started this company, right? And I think it would have been easier if we would have looked for financial support from external institutions, investors, and so on in order to help us grow. So utilize all the resources that are at your disposal. And there's a ton of them that our government as well as the rest of the ecosystem put in play or put in front of us for us to take care of.
So, Chris, based on your experience and the challenges that you've overcome, if there was one big takeaway that you could give to the entrepreneurs that are listening to this podcast, what would that be?
Well, typically I get asked, what would you do to future entrepreneurs, right? The ones that are not ready to make that step yet, especially immigrants. Like that's quite common, right? Like I'm an immigrant to this country. I'm a Canadian now, but you're always, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? It seems scary. Can I do it? And my feedback has always been, you already did the hard part. The hard part was leaving your homeland and coming to a different country with a different culture, potentially a different language. And there's many reasons why we did that, but we did it. Becoming an entrepreneur is simple compared with that. So believe in yourself, go for it. And if it doesn't work out, there's always a job waiting for you. You're employable. Otherwise, you wouldn't become an entrepreneur. And you can go on, find another employment if it doesn't work out. And often it doesn't. And that's okay. It becomes a learning experience. Try it again and again and again. And eventually you're going to succeed.
So true. Being an immigrant myself and starting the business a while back when coming to Canada was a big challenge for sure. You have a bit of a barrier when it comes to language, culture. There are so many differences. I think it's a matter of embracing those differences and ultimately, accepting the culture with open arms and ultimately, improving yourself on a daily basis.
Well, that's what makes you exceptional, right? Those differences, like you have a different perspective that somebody who grew up in the same zip code that they're currently living do not understand, right? So you can bring something different to the business world based on your past experiences in some other country. So again, like I think it's a matter of can you incorporate those into the value proposition that you're providing to your customers, into the products that you're building, to the companies that you're building. And I think that makes for even a better story and a better company.
That's true. So Chris, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you today. Where can people find out more about yourself and learn more about your company?
Yeah, the company, the name is Sparrow Connected. You can go to www.sparrowconnected.com. But myself, the easiest way would be on LinkedIn. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me, Chris Izquierdo, and you will be able to see the different companies that I started, the companies that I've exited from, the boards that I sit on, and anything related to employee communication and engagement. I'm usually publishing 1 or 2 pieces a week on that.
That's great. We'll definitely include the links to your profile as well as the company in this podcast. Thank you again for taking the time today and sharing your journey. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you, Chris.
Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Sask Entrepreneurs. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a spark of inspiration. To catch more stories and lessons learned from Saskatchewan's business leaders, visit SaskEntrepreneurs.com. Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and keep Saskatchewan strong. Ciao.